Hello and welcome to episode 1 of series 4 of Following On County Cricketer, a weekly show broadcast on podcast via the Following On feed, talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel in partnership with cricketer.com. Every week I'll be joined by two-time county championship winner Steve Harmison, as well as George DeBell and Nick Friend from the cricketer.com. And over the course of the show, we're going to be talking, as we always do, all things county cricket, looking ahead to the counties and how they shape up ahead of the season, looking at the big player moves across the off season, the big stories affecting the game, and much, much more. And of course, we welcome back Rota Watch. You're listening to Following On County Cricketer. Nick Friend, Steve Harmison, good to see you guys after hibernation. Although me and Harmy were in New Zealand for a month or so in December, we've seen each other quite regularly. But I only ever see you when it's sunny outside, Nick. So, just seeing you makes me feel somewhat happier.
I have that impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope you both well. No George this week. Myself and George, actually early shout for Rota Watch. Me and George are actually going to be in Dambulla for the opening game of the county championship. So that's where we'll be. You'll have to stick around to the end of the show to find out where Harmy and Nick are going to be over the course of the next 7 days or so. But first things first, let's just talk briefly, or for however long it takes, about some of the big stories that have affected county cricket since we were last together. And I suppose the obvious one is the 100. The sale of these teams, whether it's 49%, whatever Lancashire have got for theirs, or 100% at Yorkshire. Seems to be a lot of money that's going to be heading towards the county game. A lot of debt that's going to be cleared up. Might see a county or two moving because of it, because they've got the resources to do so. Could we also possibly see, and I know the money isn't supposed to be spent on talent, but could we also see, maybe the resources to make a marquee signing here or there, not for the whole season, but, for a month or two? Could it actually make the county championship stronger, more appealing to watch? Start with you first, Nick. Your overriding thoughts about the money that's coming into the county game off the back of the sale of the 100.
Well, it's a lot of money, which is a great thing for the county game, I think, first and foremost. Hopefully it means that, some of the headlines of recent years, around certainly, particular counties and their immediate futures can be, not forgotten about, but I suppose sort of put on the back burner for a bit. It gives, I think, everyone the opportunity to thrive rather than just survive. It does also rely on people spending the money well. Successful businesses aren't just the businesses with a lot of money, the ones that spend their money well. And I think he's spoken to a few CEOs and chairs recently. A lot of it is about, if you're going to spend £5 million of that, make sure you're spending that £5 million on something that can create 5 million more. I interviewed on the cricketer.com Neil Prescott and Peter Matthews at Gloucestershire, the CEO and chair, a couple of weeks after the sales process was, that first initial phase of the sales process was complete. And they were quite reassuring to talk to, actually, as sort of the custodians at a club that have been, pretty close to, that have been in really cash strapped and on hard times in recent years. And I think almost having been there helps them now, and they've got this money, but they're also very aware of, having been where they've been, of the importance to spend it well and wisely. And that doesn't just mean on a stadium, because I think if any county goes all out with all the money they get on a new ground in the hope of an expansion franchise, for example, you're then putting a lot of eggs in getting an expansion franchise. If you don't get that team, you then end up with a big stadium without what you wanted in it, and I suppose sort of a different kind of financial strife. So from the chats I've had, I'm kind of reassured by the number of counties that see part of this money as for a rainy day, and having that sort of emergency fund, but also that the counties who see this money as an opportunity to turn things into profit. So, for example, in Gloucestershire's case, they can't expand their ground anymore. They've got a very limited site. They can't build a hotel in it. but how can they make their events and conference space as successful and money making as they possibly can, for example. And it's those kinds of things. But it's about creating a sustainable business. I I wouldn't want to see a huge number of overseas, any frankly. We know the money's going to be ring fenced in certain ways. I'd be surprised if counties are able to spend it on a big money overseas player, because actually it doesn't really move the dial on where we are, does it, in terms of sustainability and keeping yourselves going effectively for because I can't imagine the ECB will have the same sympathy with the bailouts as they've had in the past. If in 10 years' time someone knocks their door saying they've spent £25 million. So look, it's a great thing, but it's a great thing as long as it's spent well. If it's not spent well, then it's not really worth it, is it?
No, it's not. And I think what I look at it, Nick, and we've seen in the last couple of days is it's not guaranteed either yet, because I think they're having they're having a little bit of a merry-go-round of, well, what actually we getting for our £500 million. So I think that's still up in the air. I don't think all the contracts have been signed, but I think it's important that the ring fence quite a lot of that money from a county's point of view to make sure, yes, they're mid-term future and long-term future and the business sustainability is there. But looking at the sort of county championship as I see it in the Division 1 that we've got, I mean, I'm not sure it's going to be a stronger. This year is probably going to be the strongest Division 1 that I've seen in quite a long time when it comes to the actual size of the counties that are in there. And if you put some extra financial resources on it, the odd big name, which I would imagine a lot of clubs will try and get a big name. We'll see what happens if the Indians come over, if they're allowed, if any one of them can play before the first championship, first Test match. I'm sure some of the money will go to that. But I think the 100, we talked about it the other day, John, didn't we? And we talked about Sky's involvement, and me and Neil Manthorp touched on it for a section in our show in following on this week, in talking about how how Sky are going to have their long-term future, especially with the Ambani family and Geostar, as well as the way the contracts have been signed or haven't been signed quite yet as at the 100. There's still a long way to go to see what that 500 million is, getting the counties, and more importantly, B, what the 100 franchise owners are getting for their money. So I still think there's muddy waters to come with 100, as well as with first-class cricket in this country.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to, it's been a very busy winter. As I said, myself and Harmy, we were in New Zealand. talkSPORT had the coverage to West Indies series, the India series, the New Zealand series. England were also in Pakistan. One of the great things, I'd say, really interesting things about this England setup is the amount of players who've had debuts over the course of Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes' time. And of course, the same has taken place over the last 12 months. Last summer was all about Jamie Smith and Gus Atkinson and others. The winter, Bryden Carse, Jacob Bethel. This is obviously a huge year for cricket, 2025 international cricket, India and Australia, two series that could really they will define the Bazball era. But what about the players? I mean, if you could throw a couple of names at me and the listeners, to those that you think have got, a bolter's chance of appearing for England in either series, who are the players, do you think? And I know you've just spoken to Ollie Robinson at Durham, Harmy, on an interview that you'll be able to hear on the Cricket Collective, or it's already available on podcast and on the YouTube channel, the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel. Jordan Cox, of course, had that terrible bad luck in New Zealand. Josh Hull debuted and then has been injured ever since the back end of the summer. I mean, Nick, throw a couple of names at us.
I'm going to throw something else at you. I'm going to throw something else at you first about this. And I've actually just been saying it to some colleagues at a Cricketer team day earlier today. And I find it really hard to throw. It used to be much easier to throw bolters, into the equation pre-season, I think, because actually you were coming to the start of the season knowing that there was a certain weight on county performances. And I don't think there certainly isn't in the same way there used to be. I don't think I could sit here and say, watch out for Daniel Bell-Drummond in Division 2. He could score a load of runs here. He may well do. He'll be one of the better batters going around Division 2. But do I think that is going to, significantly or otherwise improve his chance of playing for England against India or Australia? I really don't think so. I kind of feel like the bolters for this winter, like, are already known about. They're the guys that have been, they're the guys that were kind of bolters a year ago. You know, Sher Bashir is still in my mind a bit of a bolter. You know, he's not played much cricket. Josh Hull, you mentioned, you know, was kind of picked with Australia in mind, isn't he? He's sort of like this Mitchell Stark prototype, this tall, left arm, quick, bouncy, all the words that, sure, they're desirable at international level, but they're particularly desirable in Australia. And you know, the Lions tour that's just been out in Australia was unashamedly with that in mind, wasn't it? Josh Tongue batted at 7 in one of the games, and that wasn't because England thought Josh Tongue was a number 7. It was because England wants to pick 4 genuine tall quicks, and the spinner they think is going to play in Australia, and Bashir. So, you know, Ben McKinney is probably one of these guys because he went and got 100 against Australia A. He's 6'7". He plays the way that England like the batters to play at the moment. He's bloody watchable and he's incredibly talented. So I suspect he's a bolter in that sense. If you know what I mean, but I almost feel like it wouldn't. I wouldn't. I almost feel like that's a bit of credibility to say I think this guy's going to score 1,500 runs. Watch out for him in the Ashes because you know England have been pretty clear that's not the way they're selecting. It's not so much about how many as how, and that's the same. Yeah, or you know, and with the bowlers, it's not so much about how many as how quickly. So, um, yeah, I feel like the bolters are, you know, Sonny Baker thrown onto a development deal. I suppose he's played one first class game. I love watching him. He's quick. He's really interesting guy to talk to about fast bowling, actually. And, you know, John Turner has hardly played, I think John Turner's played 5 first class games. Another on a development deal, another who can hit 90 mile an hour, another who you wouldn't be surprised to see in Australia this winter. But they're not bolters in the traditional sense, are they?
No, I can, you know, show like names that you're going to be thrown at. If there's people to make debuts, it can only for me come in Zimbabwe Test match. You first got to fit in this group, and I don't, like Nick said, I don't think it matters how many runs you get in first class cricket, whether you get 2,000 runs in first class cricket. That top 7 that England have picked for the last however many months, that's going to be the top 7 all the way through till the end of Australia, bar an injury. If there's an injury, Ben McKinney comes in. I think England have more or less identified that. Bowler wise, I think Sam Cook will make his debut for England over the course of the next 6 months, and I would imagine it will be against Zimbabwe. Because obviously Jofra's in the IPL. I think they'll have to have a look at Sam and see what Sam Cook can do. And you mentioned Ollie Robinson. If something happened to Jamie Smith, I wouldn't have thought they'd go to Ollie Pope in England when they've got a chance to pick another wicketkeeper who was sort of easy accessible to get to the Test venue. I think the only reason Ollie Pope was keeping wicket in New Zealand was because it was on the other side of the world and they couldn't get Ollie Robinson there quick enough. So for me, if anything happened to Jamie Smith, Ollie Robinson possibly could make his debut. We're just talking about people who out of county cricket to make their debut. There's 3 names there, but I'd be amazed if McKinney plays before Australia, unless there's an injury to the top 3. I think Sam Cook will make his debut. You mentioned Sonny Baker. All I'm hearing is good things, and he was brilliant in the Lions trip. And you know, keep an eye on the John Turner one. The one thing I'm really pleased with from Hampshire's point of view and for John Turner's point of view, as much as I'm sure Hampshire members are quite enjoying watching Mohamed Abbas bowl at the Ageas Bowl, with Mohamed Abbas going, it opens up a frontline bowling spot with a red ball. And that, for me, if John Turner can grasp that over the course of, 10 out of 14 games, he'd be in a great place to put his hand up for an Ashes call-up at the back end of the summer. So they're just a few names that I think from left field that might come into contention when it comes to England. The household names, the rest of them, Keezy and Rob Key and Luke Wright, Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes aren't even looking at. They've got their eyes set on who they want. If you weren't on the Lions and you're not involved in that peripheral of the England group, I'm afraid, and it's not right. It's not right. It's just the way they look at it. Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a look in.
Okay, let's talk about county cricket Division 1 then. First off, let me get your predictions for who's going to win it. Nick?
I think Surrey are stronger than they were last year. So I think Surrey will win it again. I actually think it's a very strong Division 1, but I could look really stupid in 6 months' time. I kind of feel like it's a stronger Division 1, but I also feel like Surrey maybe move. I feel like Surrey have strengthened better than rivals. Obviously, in Hampshire have come so close before, but losing James Vince, is enormous. And also losing Abbas is huge. He's a brilliant bowler, and as exciting as Turner and Baker are, that they'll require a bit of patience because they've got 6 first-class appearances between them in their lives. So I'd be surprised, and if Hampshire do well, if Hampshire are up there, it'd be brilliant to watch. I mean, that Turner and Baker have gone well. I just think Surrey are stronger than they were last year with Matt Fisher coming in, with Kemar Roach back again. Nathan Smith's a really solid overseas pick. They're going to have Ben Folkes all year. They'll just be really good, as they always are. And I kind of feel like Essex losing Shardul Thacker, obviously before he made his debut, I think was a shame. He looked like a real good sort of bowling all-rounder in that spot that every county is after. They won it last year, and I can't think of a reason why they, obviously apart from Alex Stewart, I suppose, but if they can cope post Stewart, I'd expect them to be as good as they were last year, if not better.
What about you, Harmy?
Yeah, I can't look past Surrey. I really can't. I fear for a bit Hampshire, whether they've run their race at the top end for a little bit without James Vince. I think he's massive, not just his batting, but his leadership qualities. I think that would be a massive hole to fill. Like Nick said, 2 young bowlers following Abbas. But I fear a little bit for Hampshire. I fear a little bit for Essex as well. I think they're all getting older at the same time, but they've got an overseas to come in. I think I would imagine Chris Silverwood, they'll replace Shardul Thakur, and if they get that right, they'll still be a force, because Simon Harmer's a top quality performer and win games by himself. Durham might push them. I think Durham have recruited really, really well. Will Rhodes' experience, very, very good. Doggett is a good bowler, and I think will be very, very good in English conditions and in Durham's conditions. It'll depend on how much Potts and Carse play. I'd like to think Carse will play a hell of a lot. I wouldn't like to think Potts will play a hell of a lot. I wouldn't like to think Carse will play too much. I think Emilio Gay is a very good signing for Durham, and that top of the order, that could be Durham's real strength at the top of the order. If they get off the fast starts and get off the sort of big runs in the first session, you've got the likes of Bedingham to come in that middle order, who is a very, very strong player, along with Ollie Robinson. So I think Durham, as much as I am biased, I've got my Durham hat on, I think Durham will be the ones that push Surrey, but I think they'll still be a decent way behind them. Somerset will be strong because they know how to win games at Taunton, and they'll win more games at Taunton than anybody else will win at their home venue. So it's at the bottom end where you look at and think there could be a Worcester. You'd think they're in with the big boys and they might struggle a little bit, but I think there could be quite a few big counties with big reputations who are in 6 months' time could be scratching their heads thinking, where's it all gone wrong? Yorkshire have just come up. I think that's a great move, Johnny Bairstow as captain. I said this on following on this morning when Neil Manthorp. The worst thing that happened to me at the end of my career in 2010 when Philip Mustard packed in as Durham captain is that I offered to do the job. I should have been more forceful and took the job, because that would have gotten the best out of me, and it would have gotten the best out of me towards leadership, towards the rest of the team in the dressing room. And I think it's a good move that Johnny Bairstow, now his England days have gone, I still think he should be involved in the white ball stuff, but now his England days have gone. What is he focusing on? And if he's focusing on the best version of Johnny Bairstow to lead a county, then I think Yorkshire are on decent hands. So I expect them to be in and around the mid-table, but there could be some big counties at the bottom end come 6 months' time, I think.
For what it's worth, I did take a little look at the odds actually about 2 weeks ago, and Surrey are quite short odds. I just got the feeling the chasing pack positions 2 to 4, maybe even 5, are stronger as a group than they have been for a couple of years. Somerset, Essex, as well as Yorkshire coming up, Durham as well, Hampshire. But I think they're just going to end up taking points off each other. Surrey win at home and draw away. They do that. Although I can see them slipping up. They've got quite a tricky start to the championship. I can see them losing. They've obviously won the last 3. They haven't lost a lot of games when the championship was still live. But I do expect them to slip up a bit more this year. But it's their squad strength as much as anything. You know, they are, of course, like more than any other county, you know, at the mercy of the IPL or England, but they've just got that depth, haven't they? You know, I remember when Durham came to the Oval, and what was a big game towards the back end of the season, and the bowlers that Durham put out on the field, you know, that tells you everything. You know, I think Minto was playing. I think there's a couple of others.
Minto. We had
Yeah.
we had two. I think we had 319 cricketers playing.
Exactly, and it's that kind of situation which I think Surrey have got the strength to see off pretty much all of their rivals. But I really am looking forward to this season. I think it's going to be compelling cricket. I'm really interested to see how Durham do 1 year in. You know, they needed that year back in Division 1. They've got the experience of that now. Yorkshire have made some astute signings. I tell you what, if Ben Sears can actually stay fit, I think he could be a brilliant signing for Yorkshire.
I forgot Sam Connors has gone to Durham as well, bowler who did well for Derbyshire.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be fascinating. Looking at the bottom, then, you know, if you were to make a predict, I went down to Hove last week speaking to Paul Farbrace, and you know, he knows the game. He reminds me of a Neil Warnock kind of character. He comes in, he knows exactly what needs to happen to make a team perform to their absolute, you know, to their best. He's not old-fashioned in the same way that Neil Warnock is, or you know, what that type of, you know, Chris Wilder or whatever. You know, it almost seems like a criticism to say that, but he just makes his players play with confidence. He can pick a player, and he can put a team together, and he can send them out into the park. And you know, when you look at the turnaround at Sussex since he came in, you know, I'm really interested to see how Sussex go. Warwickshire, there's an interesting county. You know, Mark Robinson leaving so soon. They came very close to going down last year as well. I mean, you talk about a big county that could struggle this year. You know, it'd be interesting to see how they do. But from your perspective, Nick, looking at the bottom, who are the 2 or 3 that you think are going to struggle this year?
Ones you've named, really. I think I'd throw Nottinghamshire slightly into that mix because they, I suppose, they've got a lot of seamers, but they need to stay fit. Josh Dung's not yet made his debut for them. Dylan Bennington missed the second half of last season with his hamstring after starting so well. I honestly think this is not a cop out. I feel like it's so competitive this year. Look, Worcestershire, by their own admission, probably overperformed last year and haven't quite got the same depth of overseas play at the start of the season. Obviously, the Jason Holder at the start of last year as well. It's kind of the ultimate in that sort of bowling all-rounder slot that every county on the circuit is always after. Sussex, I think you look at Sussex on paper and you wouldn't say they've got any obvious weakness. I think Sussex is. I think for Sussex, they're playing Division 1 for the first time in a decade. I think, aren't they? The challenge for them is just that a lot of these players haven't played in Division 1 before, and actually there is a gap in standards, and it's I think more with the bat than with the ball for them, given their attack is likely to be Ollie Robinson, Jaden Seals, you know, a lot of class, a lot of experience. Jack Carson's had a few very good years, been away on Lions tours. It'll be interesting to see how the likes of James Coles, Tom Haynes, Tom Clark, guys who have a lot thought of. What am I trying to say? People think very highly of them, so it'll be interesting to see how they go in the top flight. Where I think one of the biggest differences actually, and a few people have said this to me recently, is the pitches, and you get a lot more flat pitches in Division 2 than you do in Division 1, and runs therefore come slightly easier. You've also got slightly more depth in bowling attacks, Division 1, Division 2 as well. So how that looks for, I suppose, bowling wise, particularly for Sussex and Yorkshire, Matt Fisher told me in an interview recently, and once again, the cricketer, that one of his reasons for moving to Surrey was that actually this gave him the opportunity to play 8 or 9 games of the season at close to 100%, rather than playing essentially whenever he was fit for Yorkshire, knowing he had to sort of tread water a bit to get through that particular spell of games. So how Yorkshire fare without him, and also without quite the same depth as, you know, Surrey have, which granted is everyone but Surrey. That'd be really interesting because those seven games in 8 weeks to start the season is brutal on bowlers who've not bowled a ball in anger for 6 months. So and for all the franchise cricket going on, that is still the majority of first-class bowlers, if we're being honest. So, to answer your question, I think it'll be really tricky. I think you're right that Warwickshire have had a lot of moving parts the last few months. It's not just Ian Westwood coming in to replace Robinson. It's a change of captain. It's a change of performance director. It's a change of assistant coach, batting coach, head of academy. There's a lot that's gone on. So, and they've lost Tom Nathan, one of their overseas players, to a broken hand early on. So they'll have to start well. Yeah, but it does feel particularly, at the start, a particularly competitive year.
What
Yeah.
about you, Harmy, at the bottom
Yeah,
of
Worcester.
Division 1 and also moving on to Division 2 in terms of, the teams that are going to be pushing towards the either a return to Division 1 after a shortened period or a rather longer absence?
Yeah, Worcester and Warwickshire worry me slightly. I think Warwickshire and Notts are the two big counties that I was on about. That I think, like Nick said, Notts have got a lot of bowlers. Not many of them. I think they've gone there to try and resurrect their careers because they've been injured for a huge proportion of their careers at either smaller counties or somewhere else. So if you get them fit, then Notts might have a chance. The start of the season is brutal. So I think the ones that have got, I think the depth of bowlers, not so much the depth of squad, the depth of bowlers that can come in like for like. All of a sudden, if you've got 6 fast bowlers in your group, and you're going to pick three seamers and a spinner. If you lose the same type of bowler, and you haven't got that replacement, that's where Lancashire struggled in the last couple of years. They've got a plethora of medium pace bowlers, but no fast ones, and they struggle with an overseas player. So that's why they went down. So I think that's what's going to be. And Ryan Campbell said something quite interesting, to us, to me and Neil Manthorp, is you've got to get off to a good start, because if you don't, and you're constantly looking sort of rear view mirror and looking behind, then it's amazing how poorly you play, because you're worrying about the sort of negative of the relegation and the bottom end, as opposed to looking forward and looking at the top. So it's important that you get off to a good start. And I think the teams that have got the depth of bowlers who can go the first 4 games in 5 weeks, where they can basically go, right, we've got a group of bowlers here, and not weaken our group every single time we go out and play a first-class match, I think are the ones that are going to be in the top half of the table for the first 4 games, as opposed to the teams that are going to be in the bottom. And that's where you worry the likes of, I say, Worcester have got, Jacob Duffy as an overseas player. Warwickshire, I mean, they haven't got an overseas player now. Tom Latham's gone, so they're going to have to move quickly. And like I said, the Notts ones, can they keep them on the park? They're the 3 that would worry me. Sussex, you know what? Well, you talk about Farby, it's interesting, sort of using them as sort of Neil Warnock, Chris Wilder type. That club, from a team point of view, has got better and better for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So I remember when James Franklin was sacked at Durham, and Durham had Neil Killeen for the last 2 games, and I went in to help him. The first game was against Sussex, and I made the joke. It's like, who's driving this school bus? I mean, they were all. I mean, they were. You're looking around and thinking, one of the coaches needs to be CRB checked to get for them in a car here, because you wouldn't be allowed to do that in the modern day game. And I was joking then, but what they've done is they've kept that core, like Nick's just mentioned, 4 or 5 names there, and they've actually got better and better. They've gone from bottom of 2nd division, they've gone to the mid-table, then they've gone into fighting for promotion, then they've now got promoted. So that trajectory is going forward. So I think that will stand them in good stead playing in the 1st division this year. And I think they might just hold their own. They might teeter with relegation, but I think they might just have enough to stay up.
Agreed.
And what about Division 2 then?
I think.
Yeah, go on, Nick. You don't want. Yeah.
I think I think Middlesex have recruited possibly better than anyone else on the circuit this winter. The Dane Patterson signing, I think, is a real game changer in that regard. I think they looked to seem alight when they didn't just lose Ethan Bamber to Warwickshire, but they lost 500 overs a year in losing Ethan to them. And I think what they've replaced him with is quite clever, actually. They've got Dane Patterson, who, as I wrote about on Cricket last month, they signed. It's kind of this sort of love triangle going on where they wanted Abbas as well. It was kind of loser got Patterson in a way. That Patterson, Abbas has gone to Notts, and Patterson is coming to Middlesex for the first 7 games ahead of the World Test Championship final. You know, bit between his teeth, real reason for him to be there. At Lords, where the World Test Championship final has been played, a lot for him to get out of that run of games. And he will take, you know, his record in Div 1 was exceptional for Notts, but he'll take a lot of wickets in Div 2 in April and May. But they've also, I think quietly, because there's been a lot of talk, and obviously we'll talk about Kane Williamson and the 5 to 7 games I think it is that he'll play potentially if all goes to plan between late May and September. A lot of talk about Williamson, a bit of talk about Ben Geddes early in the winter as well. He's a really good signing, and another one who's not played much cricket because of the competition he's had at Surrey, but is a really good young player and has come to play and has to properly prove himself. The one who interests me is Zafar Goa, who I would say is right up there with the best spinners in the country. 11 fivers and 30 odds championship games for Gloucestershire at Bristol that is slow and low, doesn't do an awful lot. He's played a test for Pakistan, but he's playing for Middlesex as a local. He's an enormous signing because actually what he does as well is he'll bowl a lot of the overs that Ethan Bamber bowled. So they've kind of replaced Bamber both with the international class of Patterson, but the pedigree of Goa, who bowls real sort of stump to stump, left arm spin. Rag, if there's any turn knock around, he'll find it. Pretty handy batter at number 8. And yeah, I think they'll be really hard to beat because of that. Their challenge is keeping their English team as fit, because between Toby Roland-Jones, Tom Helm, who's actually missed the first few weeks after a shoulder up over the winter, Henry Brooks, Blake Cullen, that there's a lot of sort of injury history in there. So you feel like Ryan Higgins will probably bowl quite a lot of overs as well as Goa and Patterson. But yeah, they look stronger than they did last year in the areas that they needed to strengthen, I reckon.
I reckon you could chuck 8 names in a hat here, pull 2 out. I think this is going to be a strong second, and not so much because of quality. I just think there's a lot of sides when you look down the list. There's a lot of sides who are very, very similar. You know, they've got decent sort of number 7, number 8, number 9 who bowl. So you know, there's depth in their lineups when it comes to runs. Gloucester intrigues me. You mentioned before Gloucester. You've got the captaincy now of, he is captain, and Cameron Bancroft. He's captain. Yeah. You got Cameron Green coming over for a short period of time. I mean, we've seen some of the bowlers, the quick bowlers they've had in last year. If you can keep them fit, so you look at them. You don't know what Adam Holyoke is going to give to Kent. I mean, Lancashire have to have a good start. I fear for me old mate Dale Benkenstein, they have to have a good start, Lancashire. And I think last year the reason why they crashed and burned was because their overseas signings were really, really poor last year. And I think that cost them their place in Division 1. This year, I mean, they'll get runs. You know, Marcus Harrison and Keaton Jennings will get runs. It's just whether they got enough. Like Nick mentioned before, you know, the wickets in the second division are flat. And Lancashire have got a lot of 80-mile-an-hour bowlers. And I think that was the concern from the members of Lancashire last year is, have you got something that can take wickets on a flat, get somebody out on a flat one? And I think that's why they went down. So, and we spoke to Darren Lehman a couple of weeks ago, and you know, the buff effect at Northampton, and talked about they've got some exciting young cricketers as well. You know, David Sale's son, who I played with, I think he's pretty talented, and they've recruited quite well as well. So yeah, I've gone through the whole lot, still no further forward. I do agree with Nick. I think Middlesex will be the standout team. And then it could be anybody. Derbyshire under Mickey Arthur. It's a big year for Mickey at Derbyshire because it's now his team. It's his club. He has recruited everybody apart from Wade Masden. Everybody else has come in through Mickey Arthur. So he has to go, right, it's me now. So the rest of it, I'm saying Middlesex to win the league and 1 from 7.
I think the Cam Green signing is an interesting one. This is maybe a bit, I don't know if it's quite contrarian, but I don't quite get it. This is big, you know, pretty big name, great for the game, etc. All those things. Don't get me wrong, Cam Green, a fully fit Cam Green is a fully fit, you know, he's a serious cricketer. The fully fit Cam Green is also bowling, and would perform the exact role that actually Gloucester kind of need from their second overseas player alongside Bancroft. What they've actually got is a bloke who's going to bat 4, 5, 6, isn't fit to bowl, and therefore sort of just joins this very long middle order that they've got, and means that they go into the season without a. They've got one specialist. They've got one specialist spinner at the club, and that's Ed Middleton, who's played very, very few professional games. But they lost Safagoa to Middlesex, and they're basically relying on Ollie Price and Graham Van Bruen to bowl their spin early season. And if you think back to last year when they had Bo Webster come in for a portion of the season, he's very much the profile that, as I said a couple of times, that every single county's after a batting seamer, a seam bowling batter, whichever one you want. Well, what you don't really necessarily want early season is your overseas to be a middle order specialist batter, if that makes sense. Seriously good player, huge pedigree, but has been injured for a very long time. Has just said in the last couple of days he won't be fit to bowl until the start of the next Shield season. And also, Cricket Australia are bloody careful with their players, and we're talking, old off spinners here, not 6'7" giant all rounders ahead of an Ashes summer. So, you'd be he's there for 5 games. You'd certainly be surprised if he played all 5. I don't know. He may well be off 400s, maybe look very silly, but I don't think it's quite the signing that it looks on paper.
Okay.
He's going to average 100, isn't he?
Yeah. Hopefully for Gloucester fans.
Yeah. A lot of we started the show talking about the 100 and the changes that the money is going to make to the game. One of the changes that will come in is the pressure will be taken out of the blast. Suddenly you don't need to be paying or playing all these games for financial reasons because the counties are making enough money. Obviously, they can always make more money, but essentially, listening to those on the ground, Paul Farbrace at Hove was saying that he thinks, or he can see a world next year when the county championship is reduced to 12 games, I think he said.
Ryan Campbell said exactly the same thing.
I can see a world where they're both reduced to 12 games. And I think, I think that's the best.
Paul Farbrace even mentioned 10 games at the blast.
So did Campbell.
So, when you kind of hear these numbers being mentioned and you think to yourself, well, is this where we're heading? I mean, is that what you see, Nick? I mean, the season will be as it was pretty much this year, but next year, and we know that the ECB are having quite high level chats. I went to something at Lord's. Rob Andrew is really looking into changes to the season as of 2026 onwards. Yeah. So, whether that's moving the 50 over tournament, whether that's reducing the blast, playing it in one block rather than, seemingly spiraling it over the entire season and everyone forgets it's on and then suddenly the final's happening. What kind of changes can you see and which changes would you?
And they both mentioned 50 over competition at the start of the season.
Yeah. Which is kind of what Australia did for a while. In fact, the thing
we used to do it. Benson's when I first came into the game, you played 5 Benson's game at the start of the season, quarter final, a few championship games, then the semi final, a few championship games, then the final.
I've written about the schedule so much that I don't know what I'm going to do when it's finally resolved. But
it will never be final.
Never ever get resolved. Yeah.
It never has been resolved. But from what I understand, like one of the options on everyone's, bear in mind there are so many stakeholders here that everyone will have different opinions and they'll be different, and everyone will have a different ideal schedule drawn out. I think one that I've heard a few times now is 12 blast games, 12, which would mean the opportunity to shake up the groups and go back to 6 sort of regionalised groups and potentially then play one team from outside of your group. Well, sorry, 2 teams from outside of your group each year, which means that eventually you go around the whole system and you actually played all the teams. Which means you lose, which I quite like. Actually, it means that you no longer have situations where Surrey have never played Durham before until last year's quarter final, for example.
Yeah.
So 12 games does that, splits the groups up. I think, and schedule or no schedule, I think the blast groups have needed to shake up for years. And it also actually reduces the travelling, which is a major part of the player side of this, the physical, mental well-being of players. If you can improve that by not having Northants driving to Durham, for example, but having Northants in a group of 6 and Durham in a group of 6, that means they don't have to do those journeys is only a good thing. And I think 12 Champion games, 14's not perfect, everyone doesn't play everyone. 12's not perfect because everyone won't play everyone. But I think as far as compromises go, that you create the 2, that would give you 2 spare weeks of the schedule in terms of playing days, but also sort of travel days. And it would help create the minimum standards that the PCA and the players have been after quite a while in terms of 3 days minimum either side of championship games, which I think is a pretty reasonable ask if you want a decent level of cricket, and getting rid of these back-to-back blast games, which I don't think help anyone. And then it does also leave the option open. I've heard this mooted a couple of times. If you wanted to have, cricket is obsessed with filling gaps in a schedule with cricket, right? And so as soon as you clear 2 weeks, no doubt people will go, well, what can we put there? In an ideal world, I think you have 2 weeks and you spread them around the summer and they become rest days. But I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that you might then get the opportunity to almost split the One Day Cup into 2 sections, and you have a couple of games played early season where everyone's around. So let's say it becomes a 12-game group stage, for example, and this is just me spitballing here. You could play 4 games in April if you really wanted to do that over the first 2 weeks of the season, for example, and use those 2 weeks that we're creating by taking those games back, but by adding 4 one-day games there, and then you do have everyone available, barring the IPL guys. Then you have your 8-game One Day Cup in August. Of course, you can't just move the One Day Cup to the start of the season, because if you do that, then you'll end up with the same problem we had at the start, which is what goes alongside the 100. And if you're going to reduce the championship, you can't then put championship games on the 100. So I don't hate that idea. I don't love it either, but but if there is a worry about, and there is a legitimate worry about, whether these players are getting any 50-over cricket in their legs before they go and play for England, then there is a little gap where you could get a couple of games in without burning players out from a schedule perspective, from a workload perspective early on. And that's one of the big things with this 7 champion rounds in 8 weeks, which if you've not played any cricket for 6 months, that's an awful lot. Which is one of the reasons that people have talked about the 50-over cup. Simon Cook said to me at Kent's Media Day, Kent's DOC, that was something they kind of favoured for that reason, that it gives a more manageable entrance to the season, particularly for seamers. But that's a long old spitbally way of saying, who knows? It's been Ollie Andorby, the new PCA chair, joked at his first media engagement that the PCA minutes have been the same at every meeting since 1967. Players aren't paid enough, players don't like the schedule, and players don't like the umpires, and nothing's changed. So, I don't think it'll be so resolved, but I do think we'll get a different schedule for 2026. I do think this is the year that change comes. Whether it's perfect, I don't think it will be, because I don't think it can be perfect.
No, I like the One Day Cup at the start of the season, but you, for me, I don't know why you can't have, but adding another competition to already to let the 100 adds 4, that makes it a 4 competition. But I think because you've got all the players, or majority of the players available at the start of the season, why we had a Benson Hedges in the NatWest, a NatWest Tire Cup in October in August would be ideal. But I think a 50-over competition at the start of the summer to get players into playing cricket again and get the body moving, and less is obviously from an injury point of view before the championship, because I agree that's brutal. Having not played for 6 months, coming and playing 6 championships in 7 weeks or 7 in 8 weeks that's not fair on players. But if you did have a one-day competition like what it was, 4 group games, a semi-final and a final, I think that gets the higher standard of 50-over competition played. And then in August, it's more or less a second team cup. It's the ones that aren't in the 100. It's your younger players. That's a trend. For me, that's looking at the next best. That's your midterm, long-term future of your club, and having a look at your sort of 16, 17, 18-year-old players in that August competition. But for me, I would have a big, massive 50-over competition at the start of the season in April, and have the whole thing the final done by middle of May, when you've got all your best players available, and it's a proper 50-over competition, and then that keeps the standard high.
Okay, guys, as we come towards the back end of the show, then I promise Rota Watch.
Can I jump in before that?
As long as you're
and
quick.
Say that I've plugged the Cricketer a couple of times in so far today, and I am biased, obviously, but I don't think we've ever had
wall chart.
Well, no, I don't think we've the wall chart, but I also don't digitally. I don't think we've ever had a more a more complete chock-a-block preview, county preview content plan, and for £1 as a first month subscription offer. I think if you read everything we've done and are doing preview-wise, I reckon it would come out at about 0.1p per article. So no, really, really good value, and a lot more on the schedule there as well. And which, as I say, is my favorite subject. I don't know what I'll do with myself. Gonna have to find another hill to die on.
Yeah.
Well, you should have mentioned that at the start of the show. So where are you going to be over the next 7 days, Nick, as I head off to Sri Lanka?
I am going, yeah, all right for some. I am going to I'm going to Trent Bridge to watch Nottinghamshire play Durham, which would be nice.
Good game, man.
Yeah.
Good game.
Sounds like Ben Stokes won't be playing, but
No.
but a lot of guys with England interests will be, when that's Pennington, Tongue, Potts, Cars, names that we've McKinney. Really looking forward to watching him bat. I'm not sure I've seen him bat live. But I interviewed him in January, and I really enjoyed talking to him. But there's something really attractive about really tall batters just whacking on top of the bounce, and they're sort of like.
I said to Trez over the window, I said, you've got to get to work with McKinney. You just Gothic's the perfect person to work with him. If England see him as a future opener, they've got to get him to Trescothick as quickly as possibly can. More from a mindset of going out there, because I mean, Trez
said a couple of things that were really interesting, particularly around this sort of championship versus England thing. In that, actually, because of the kind of, not dissimilar to Crawley, I suppose, the way he bats, and I think maybe there's something, this could be wrong, but maybe there's something in being as tall as him, that this was after he got his runnable 100 against Australia A on that January tour. So he kind of feels more comfortable in that environment in Australia on bouncy pitches against quick bowlers. Maybe just a good salesman saying the right stuff. But I suppose when you're that tall and you want to play on top of the bounce and that kind of thing, he said that comes much more naturally to him than being a tall bloke with a heavy head, potentially falling across a bean swinger from your 80-mile-an-hour county pro. And he actually said, like, it would mean a great deal more to him to have a big county season for Durham than to have that 100 against Australia A, because he knows he can do that in those conditions. So yeah, I don't know, refreshing to hear somebody thought about it to that extent, but also but yeah, I mean, I suppose also the kind of thing England would like to hear, because they've obviously scouted him for that reason, that they see him as somebody who can play like international standard bowling, I suppose, in the international standard conditions. But he's a kid, so there's a lot that he'll go through that'll be good and bad over the next year or two form-wise. But so there's been a lot of talk about him, but he's not played a full season yet, has he? So
no, he hasn't played a full season. Ryan Campbell was asking just to be patient with him and not to put too much pressure on him.
Well, unlucky.
He needs to learn. Yeah. So I says another one. It could be another one that's going to be, a finished opening batter by the time he's age of 21, and he hits his peak when he's 23, and he's had his England chance. But hey, we've seen that film before, haven't we? Me, I'm taking my granddaughter to Disneyland Paris on Thursday till Sunday. And then I'm going to watch Durham Academy on Monday. So that's where I'm going to be over the course of the next week or so.
Brilliant. Well, look, hopefully we'll be back with George next week. I'll be bringing back some insight into the Sri Lankan domestic tournaments. Maybe, probably not. It's probably not even cricket season in Sri Lanka. I did have a quick look at the weather, and it looks like, as it always does in that part of the world,
I think it's warmer than it is here.
It's going to rain. Well, it's quite nice down here. It's quite balmy. Guys, thanks for your time. And thanks for listening and joining us here on Following On County Cricketer.